قرآني نبض حياتي، قرآني طهر ذاتي، قرآني عصمة أمري، قرآني طوق نجاتي. قرآني نبض حياتي، قرآني طهر ذاتي، قرآني عصمة أمري، قرآني طوق نجاتي. قرآني نبض حياتي، قرآني طهر ذاتي، قرآني عصمة أمري، قرآني طوق نجاتي.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم. أما بعد. We continue our discussion with regards to the recent events that has gripped the Muslim Ummah and the world at large subsequent to what had happened in Paris. But before continuing with our discussion today, I would request that you listen to or you view this program not in isolation, but rather as a series that we have commenced with last week, because in our previous discussion we gave a broad outline and an introduction to what we are saying, and it would be unjust to take sections of a particular session and quote it out of context. We spoke about what had happened, we spoke about a few questions, and we are now continuing our discussion as what should be our response. But before going on to that, let's understand that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is a man sallallahu alaihi wasallam who is being praised constantly throughout the globe. There is no minute in the day where there is not someone, somewhere, calling the adhan, the iqamah, or engaged in prayer while declaring, I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. No moment passes except someone, somewhere is sending salawat upon him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or delivering a lesson about his life, or narrating one of his noble statements, or making dua to Allah and sealing it with the salah upon his beloved messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All prophets, including Musa, Moses, Isa, Jesus alayhim wassalam, and we send peace and salutations upon all the prophets. So all prophets, including Musa and Isa, acknowledged his status and prayed behind him. And Allah, the Creator and Lord, has made it such that there is no one who knows about him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and yet does not believe in him, except he will be deprived from entering paradise. No amount of abuse, no amount of insult, no amount of mockery from the ignorant can come even close in comparison to this man's lofty status and his lofty praise, for he has been named Ahmad, the one given and giving the highest quality of praise, capable for a human. And he has been named Muhammad, the one given the highest quantity of praise, capable for a human, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Let us therefore not become too distracted from the real purpose of his life, longing for Allah and glorifying him and that which he loves, especially on certain days. Amr ibn As radiallahu ta'ala anhu used to say, I could not look him in the eye because of the awe If I were to ask to describe him, I would not be able to, because I could not look him in the eye. And verily you, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, are on an exalted standard of character, as has been mentioned in the Quran. Having said what I've just said, these are times of great tribulations for Muslims. And every few weeks, something happens that really darkens all of our hearts and makes us, or makes all of us, upset. And this is one of those times. If you are keeping up with the news, you know what I'm talking about. You know about the protests that are happening all over in many parts of the world. In this time of anger and reaction to the many Muslim brothers and sisters, and those who feel that when the Prophet of Allah is insulted, then he is insulted, and he should do something about that. And his blood boils when the Messenger of Allah is spoken of in a way that did not deserve to be spoken of. Even the slightest insult to our Messenger is enough to take all the happiness and joy out of our lives and make us forget all of it, because our love for him is that intense. As Muslims, we do not endorse or sanction extrajudicial killings, which I have mentioned previously. We do not believe that any individual should take the law in his hands. It is truly tragic that someone became angry at some cartoonist and killed them, and many others. Knowing what the Prophet was and knowing what the Sharia commands us to do, this could have been prevented. The fact of the matter is that killing such people goes against Islam. It goes against the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Those who thought that they were defending the Prophet rather ended up harming the prestige of Islam, and this causes much more damage than any potential good. And I would like us to refer to what I have said last week in the previous discussion about some of the questions that are asked, whether this really took place by Muslims, whether it was staged. Allah knows best. Secondly, we do not shed tears. We do not shed tears for the racist, hateful staff of Charlie Hebdo, who took such pleasure in spitting at 1.6 billion Muslims. We do feel pity for them, pity that they chose to live a life of hate and die a death of hate. We pity them for being consumed and blinded by such racist aversion. At the same time, as we condemn that violence and we disassociate ourselves from such actions, we also have to point out that this violence and such violence does not occur in a vacuum by simply pointing out the reasons that have led to this act. We are not justifying or sympathizing, but just like in some places when some mass shooter goes on a rampage in a school, and the media talks about his childhood and what had happened. Similarly, we want to talk about these people's personalities. What are their social, economic, political circumstances in France? Not to justify, but to clarify that is indeed, it is a two-way street. Nothing happens without provocation. Nothing happens just for the sake of happening. There are reasons why certain things happen. They say that this is about the freedom of speech, freedom of expression. But I really want to ask, is it really about the freedom of speech? Is it fair to ignore the power dynamics? Is it fair to ignore the social, political circumstances of these people that have allegedly committed this crime? This cartoon is a catalyst, as some people have said. And underneath, there was a lot of fuel ready to be sparked up. What happened was not just because of the cartoon. There were no other circumstances and the cartoon appeared. People might not have been killed if there were no other circumstances and the cartoon appeared. People might not have been killed. Yes, we would have been angry, and we have the right to be angry, and we have the right to be offended, like how you claim that you have the right to express what you want to express, and we will come to the aspect of freedom of expression. But we also have been angry, and we have the right to be angry, and we have the right to be offended. Stay tuned. Inshallah, when we come back, we'll continue with this discussion about the right to be angry and offended.
طوق نجاتي قرآني نبض حياتي قرآني طهر ذاتي طهر ذاتي قرآني عصمة أمري قرآني طوق نجاتي.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. As we were saying, what happened was not just because of the cartoon. If there were no other circumstances and the cartoon appeared, people might not have been killed. Yes, we would have been angry, and we have the right to be angry, and we have the right to be offended. If you think it is your right to offend, I think it is our right to express our offense. I do say that there were other circumstances that created this violence. However, as I've said, and I'm continuously saying, let's not quote out of context. How we react and how we express that violence is a separate matter. It does not in any way justify taking the law in your own hands. It does in no way advocate the killing, an extrajudicial killing. We will come back to that. But let's talk a little bit about the circumstances that might have created this violence. May we state, do we have the freedom to say that this is but a response to the growing marginalization of the Muslims in France? Muslims constitute approximately 6 to 8 million out of a total population of 61 million. 85% of France is Roman Catholic. Muslims make up just fewer than 10%. France has banned the hijab and has disallowed the building of minarets. How's that about freedom of expression? 60% of prison inmates in France are Muslim. Muslims live in ghetto-like areas and abject poverty. Muslims have been continuously humiliated in the press by the likes of Charlie Hebdo. It is one of the most offensive, racist, malicious publication which makes its money by jeering, mocking, vilifying Islam and Muslims. It had published a naked caricature of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the publication has been deliberately provocative and challenging 1.6 billion Muslims. What hurts the Muslim community, even as we say we have nothing to do with the terrorists that kill these people, what hurts us is that from our perspective, there does seem to be a double standard. And what's that double standard? Freedom for the powerful, by the powerful, with the powerful. Freedom for the powerful, by the powerful, with the powerful. Let us leave aside what occurs in Europe and reflect what is happening in countries where Allied British and American troops are repeatedly bombing and killing. Let us look past the locking up of Muazzam Beg for exposing British collaboration with the Syrian regime in torture, or even Edward Snowden and Julian Assange's freedom of speech. It remains very obvious for those informed that freedom of speech does not exist anywhere in the world. And if it does not suit the ruling paradigm or the ruling ideology. Francis and the West claim that free expression is a fundamental principle. If France or the West and the Western powerful media claim that free expression is a fundamental principle, then take it, it's a myth. It's an opiate of the masses explicitly invoked for anti-Semitic purposes. In the years leading up to the Holocaust, and has recently been used to whip up hatred of immigrants, hatred of ethnic minorities and Muslims. Everywhere else in the free world, in France, free expression is for some, for the powerful, by the powerful, but not for the others, not for the weak. The West has to interrogate its stubborn adherence to the principle of freedom of speech. Freedom of speech has legitimized slander. It has legitimized insults. It has legitimized vilification. It has legitimized rumor mongering and disgrace, which is more consistent with the dark ages of indiscriminate brutality. A few decades ago, America was part of the world which was well known for the way that it treated and it portrayed the African Americans. Look at the cartoons that were drawn. Look at the portrayals of the African Americans as being subhuman, literally like, astaghfirullah, an animal. These types of images were common in the 20s and the 30s, and even up to the early 50s. Some of these have trickled down to mainstream cartoons, such as Tom and Jerry and others. If you look at those cartoons, some of these images are deemed to be so offensive that they are disgusting. They were mainstream in America. Now, who among these newspapers that are defending the freedom of speech will want to print some images and such cartoons? We don't find those images being printed. Similarly, in Nazi Germany in the 20s, you look at how they portrayed the Jews as satanic bank man, evil man. Now, who amongst those people that are defending the freedom of speech will want to print those same images in their magazines? And the fact of the matter is that this same magazine that printed these pictures of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam 2 years ago, they fired. 2 years ago, they fired one of their own, and they took him to court because he wrote a column that was deemed to be anti-Semitic. And it was, to be honest and it was to be honest and be made fun of the Jewish people in a manner that was befitting, not befitting of a human being. And he stereotyped them. The point being, there is this double standard. Almost 15 countries across Europe have laws against Holocaust speech denial. To say anything about the Holocaust in a derogatory manner, to deny it happened, to make fun of it, or simply say that maybe the numbers were wrong, again, I want to be clear. And I'm not saying that I'm just quoting. If somebody says it, in those countries, you will be sent to jail. Again, I'm not denying the Holocaust. I think the Holocaust was a great tragedy, and that Hitler was an oppressive demon who committed this. We are not defending what happened, but we are saying, why is it that in your own countries it is not allowed to make fun of the Holocaust, yet it is not just allowed, but encouraged to make fun of what we as Muslims hold sacred? You talk about freedom of expression, but you are the ones that are banning the Muslim lady from expressing herself and expressing herself in her modesty. You are the ones that are banning the niqab and so many symbols of Islam. And then we talk about freedom of expression, we talk about liberty, but the fact of the matter is that your own Muslim populations have suffered first from colonialism and then from the way you are treating your North African community. Multiple institutional racism, and anybody that has been to France and knows the French Muslim community knows exactly what I'm talking about. That the Muslims of France really have it bad in every area of life. For the time they are born, they are facing institutional racism. They do not have the same opportunities for education, the same opportunities for jobs. So what hurts the Muslim community, even as we say we have nothing to do with the terrorists that killed or those who have allegedly killed these people, what hurts us, that from our perspective, there does seem to be a double standard. What do you think is going to happen? Yeah, let's talk about the issue of power dynamics, as some scholars have said. A little bit of psychology here. When the media and politicians make fun of a powerful person, this might be funny. But if they make fun of the government, this might be funny. But if the media and those who are powerful, if they make fun of a minority, all of a sudden it's not funny anymore. It is actually scary. And we see this with the African Americans in America and with the Jews in Nazi Germany. When the dominants start to make fun of a small minority, it is not funny because we are talking about the people who feel threatened. They not only feel it, but they are genuinely suffering financially, economically. And we add to this as well, less than 100 years after the amazing attacks in Germany, we see people protesting in the streets of Germany that Muslims should get out of Europe. Isn't this going to terrify? The hatred and mob mentality that takes place in that environment? You will get people who will flip over. Again, this is not to justify. We are just saying that the other side is not fully innocent. You are not being fair about the freedom of speech, freedom of expression, but rather you want the freedom of speech to insult the Muslims and others. It goes without saying that such distasteful and consistent ridicule in the form of satire does not justify murder. It does not justify murder. But murder as a result of an individual vendetta is not acceptable in any society. The law should never be taken in your own hands. No one is born with a God-given right to take lives, even if you are offended or oppressed. One cannot be judge, jury, and executor. But at the same time, it is also idiotic to continue provoking a group of people who have a long list of their own internal, external, political, and social grievances that stretch back for many years. And I'm talking of the North African Muslim population of France, and then expect that nothing will happen. Muslims should nevertheless deal with insults by drawing on their religion which teaches patience and defense in a non-violent form. In such a scenario, surely this sad episode of taking of lives should help us realize that freedom of speech cannot equate to uncensored freedom to offend. Inshallah, as we continue, we will continue discussing the aspect of the notion of freedom of speech and Islam. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
قرآني نبض حياتي، قرآني طهر ذاتي، قرآني عصمة أمري، قرآني طوق نجاتي. قرآني نبض حياتي، قرآني طهر ذاتي، قرآني عصمة أمري، قرآني طوق نجاتي. قرآني نبض حياتي، قرآني طهر ذاتي، قرآني عصمة أمري، قرآني طوق نجاتي. قرآني نبض حياتي، قرآني طهر ذاتي، قرآني عصمة أمري.